Hi. One of the questions I usually get in the morning when I read my emails is usually a question regarding myself personally, my story, my background a little bit, and kind of where I developed my ideas and concepts in the faith. So normally I don't talk about that. I don't like to get into much about my background. I like to let my work go out there and kind of let people judge me on that, the books I've written. And then ask me questions and challenge me on those areas. But briefly, I grew up in a traditional Christian home. I became a believer in the faith at the age of about 17. I was introduced first into the area of apologetics by my mother, who was a big fan of Dr. Walter Martin. And then at that point, when I started to see the differences between Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses and other United Pentecostals and other faiths, I started my studies in those areas around the age of 18, 19 years old. And so I began to, pick up books and listen to lectures on tapes. This is before the internet, of course, before we had access to all this information. We had to buy multiple books on different topics and listen to audio tapes and lectures and so forth. And that's what I did. I had a whole library of these things in the area of apologetics. So I learned early on how to defend my faith. Now, I always still had questions about it, to the sense that I know there were some areas of disagreement among Christians in the areas of eschatology, end times, and how God saves individuals, and still the ideas of the Trinity in the Old Testament, things like that. But I started early on, first 10 years in the area of apologetics, and I went to school learning the areas of theology and doctrine, looking for my bachelor's in religion, a master's in theology, even looking at a PhD, going towards that field. So early on, I again went in the area of apologetics. And now again, my parents were also very active in the martial arts. I started training in martial arts when I was 5 years old, competed in multiple tournaments, won different medals and awards and championships. I even fought. I did a lot of underground fighting, which is not really legal and sanctioned, but I did a lot of that early on in my 20s, challenging myself. I also fought in the cage as an MMA fighter for a few times, winning again championships and awards and different tournaments, and going on and getting my black belt in 2 different disciplines. So I had that also in my life that I was focusing on, but mainly my studies. I gave that up later on because, again, there's no future in that, just a lot of pain. But I focused a lot on my studies in theology and biblical studies, and went on to get my PhD in biblical studies, and then even went back to get my associate scholars degree in linguistics at the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies, accredited through Hebrew University. And again, this is in linguistics, studying in more in depth of the Hebrew, the Aramaic, and New Testament Greek. And I did all that even with my PhD in biblical studies. I learned all that, Akkadian, Ugaritic, and all different languages, but this is a little differently. There is different views between ancient Israel, or the thought of a Jew in the East, versus here in the U.S., we call the West, or even European thought. There are different views. And I started off in traditional Christian view here in the U.S., but after 10 years, I moved away from those views because they weren't complete. I felt that they were lacking, mainly because of the Greek concepts and the Greek thought. When I went to the more of the Jewish thought, the Second Temple period, first century Jewish thought, and even looking at the prophets and the writings, a little more depth in the language of the Hebrew, I felt to get more fulfilled in my belief and understanding, and my foundation grew stronger as I learned it that way. So I felt a lot in regards to the Trinity, the resurrection, the deity of the Messiah. All these things just amplified when I went into that area of study in first century Second Temple period Jewish thought, and moving away from the Greek thought concepts, which to me was not complete. Now, I have good friends who are in ministry, who have churches in different areas where I'm at. And again, they have their degrees in divinity and so forth, and even their teachers or instructors, who they hold really highly, have degrees in divinity as well. Now, that's not a specific area of study and research, of course. It's more of a jack of all trades, but not really a master of any of it. But the saying is jack of all trades, master of none. But again, they focus on ministry because they want to help people and work their community, which is perfect. But for me, I look at it as a research scholar. I have to go into the research and study, looking at the resources, looking at the sources themselves directly if I can, or getting too close as I can to them, and then changing, and then seeing that my Christian concepts and thoughts were not complete. And so, my good friend stayed that path, which is fine. Then I put together books. I started writing, and I put together 4 of my best-selling books into one volume called The Doctrines of God. And this is the hardback, and I have the paperback as well, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. But this deals with 4 of my best-selling books, dealing with the name of God, where you might never heard this, but it's nothing new in Israel, nothing new amongst Jews, is that the name of God is not Yahweh. That's actually a pagan Greek concept historically. And the Jews know the name of God. They've kept it traditionally and preserved it. Even in the Hebrew scriptures, Jewish sources, it's there. And so I write on that. I write on the first Satan, the idea of Satan in the Hebrew scriptures versus how we see Satan here in the U.S. in our Christian Bibles. I look at the word grace, the foundation of grace, the origin of grace, which most people have no clue about because they don't know the language of the Hebrew. They don't know where it comes from and how it was changed in the Greek, and it's not the same in the New Testament. My Presence, They Will Go, deals with the doctrine of the Trinity strictly from the Old Testament, and these are not shadows. These are clear teachings that God is a Trinity and that he is plural when he appears and when he communicates with his creation. So it's not foreign in the Old Testament, as most people like to say, or it's hidden in the Old Testament, revealed in the New. If you have a foundation of this, it will amplify the New Testament tenfold, and you'll see it more clearly, because I believe strongly that the Old Testament contains the Trinity, sometimes even a lot of stronger areas of than in the New Testament. So this book is available. It's got over 300 pages of my work, and again, I do that because there is a lack of foundation, understanding where our faith comes from. You could be a Christian, but if you don't know where your foundation lies in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, what is called the Tanakh, and you don't build off of that foundation with the New Testament, then you can come up with some very strange doctrines and theologies that are really foreign to Jewish thought. And that's what I have found even as my early Christian. Now, my parents, again, my background, my mother is Italian. She's also Jewish. My dad's Hispanic. So I got a mixture of those three, an Italian foremost, and then, of course, Hispanic and then Jewish. So I went back to my Jewish faith, went back to the foundation, the origin of my faith. So that's where I rely. So if I want to go to the Greek New Testament, I want to study that, then yeah, I use my resources, Daniel Wallace, Bruce Metzger, Bill Mountz's work, scholars in that who are focused on that area. And then, of course, I look at the Hebrew scriptures, the Septuagint, how we got it. I look at Emmanuel Tov, Kabbalistic Jewish writings, Joseph Dan. I have the Talmuds, the volumes of the Mishnah, the Torah, the all the different Jewish writings and literatures, the Midrash. So I focus more on my research studies in the faith. So that's where I am. I spent a lot of time, 30 years doing this, and still love the area of apologetics, but I use it differently now than I did back in my early years. So that's a little of my story. And again, that's who I am. That's where I'm going. And I'm still in my research, still my studies. I'm still learning things new, but it's always strengthening my faith, the things that I learn. It's not contradicting my faith or opposing my faith. It's actually strengthening it and really helped me grow in my faith and my relationship with God a lot closer than it was 20 years ago when I was just studying as a Christian. Now I've embraced my Jewish roots, my Jewish faith, in a way that everything that I believed before has been amplified more than it was. So that's just a little bit about my background, about my story. I hope this helped a little bit about who I am and where I come from. And you can go to our website, drlgarza.org, and I have a lot of links to a lot of stuff that I've done in my career. You can also please like, share on this site, and leave a comment if you need, or email me at drlgarza@email.com. But again, I hope this helps. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel here. And if you have any questions, send me an email. I'll be glad to try and answer anything you might have for me. So again, thank you. God bless, and hope to talk to you soon.